Thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to elected members, officers, and anybody who's tuning in online to this, the first Children and Learning Committee meeting of the new term. I'm Councillor Lynn Devine, the convener of Children and Learning, which is a great honour for me. And I'm very excited to be able to see all the groundbreaking work our staff and young people are doing in Angus. I'd like to thank my predecessors for chairing this meeting over the past 5 years, especially for introducing presentations from young people. I certainly want to continue that, as it really gives us a tremendous opportunity to hear firsthand from them, to be able to question them, and for them, most importantly, to realise that we want to hear their voices, and for them also to understand that we're not ogres, really. Before starting the actual agenda, I'd like to point out that you will receive alerts for information reports. The reason for not including them on any agenda is that no decisions need to be taken, but they are what it says in the tin. They're for information, and it is really useful for us as councillors. So I would urge you to take the time to read them. And on this occasion, we've got 2 reports appertaining to this committee, and I would love to take the opportunity of commending the staff of Strathmore Centre in Forfar for all the work they've done over the pandemic. They've turned themselves inside out, they've been so inventive, and they have supported our very vulnerable young people and their families. So they were well deserving of the very good inspection report that they got. So I would really like that noted and passed on if possible. So now, we'll be glad to know we can go to the agenda, which is apologies and substitutes. I think we now know that.
Thank you, convener. We have an apology from Councillor Beattie with Councillor Duff substituting. Also apologies from Mrs. Jackie Wilson and Mrs. Anna Chain.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? See no hands. The committee membership is on your letter. Children and Learning remit, you'll see that's really quite short. Well, if you're on communities, it's very short because they've got pages of it, and we've only got 6 sentences, but each of these has really got a lot to it, which for new members you'll discover as we go along. So then we're on to minutes of previous meeting. Is that approved as a correct record? Approved. Thank you. And the special meeting, which was held just before the budget setting meeting back in March, is that approved? Approved. Thank you. Now we're on to the committees. Now, none of these subcommittees meet on a regular basis. Some of them meet very rarely indeed, but we need to populate them today from this committee. So most of them require 3 people, and most of them require the convener and vice convener, but I'd like to move that between Councillor Melville and Councillor Shepherd. I hope that's okay. So the first one is school attendance, which would be me as convener and Councillor Melville. That only needs the 2 of us with a parent member.
Sorry, just as we're going on, could I maybe ask just for seconders as we're going through the process, please?
Yeah, I think Councillor Clark seconding all of them actually from the administration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The special cases, myself as convener and Councillor Shepherd, vice convener, +1 from the non-administration or non-aligned. Do you have somebody to go on to this? I'm not seeing any hand up.
Councillor Devine, sorry, Chair. There's Councillor Gregg coming in. I wondered if there was an issue because we do have appointees for these.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Convener. I would like to nominate for the special cases for Louise Nichol.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Councillor Wan. Right. Moving on to the next one. The staffing subcommittee is myself as convener and Councillor Shepherd, plus one other. Councillor Nichol, which one?
Oh, Louise. I would like to nominate Ross for that.
Ross, great. Thank you. And seconded by?
Again, I'll second that, Councillor Devine.
Right, educational records, convener myself and Councillor Melville, plus one other. Not a very popular one, this. Oh, there's a hand, sorry. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to nominate Louise Nichol for that one, please.
Seconded by?
Again, I'll second that, Councillor
Councillor
Devine.
Wan. You're just going to second all of them, Councillor
Yeah,
Wan?
that's probably easier if you just say that. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. The executive, that would be convener myself and Councillor Shepherd, plus one other. Councillor Nichol.
I would like to nominate Ross for that.
Ms. Gregg. Seconded by Councillor Wan. The Special Appeals Committee is a bit different. It's either the convener or the vice convener, whoever's around at the time, with 2 administration members and 2 non-administration. From the administration, we would put forward Councillor Bell and Councillor Meehan, both seconded by Councillor Clark. And Councillor Nichol.
It's Councillor Gavin Nichol this time.
Oh, hi, it's okay.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Louise Nichol and Councillor Ross Gregg.
Thank you. And who's seconding? Oh, yes, Councillor Wan seconding that.
Yeah.
Now there's the other one, which is a little bit strange, is the Educational Appeal Committee. We are asked to just note this because there's nobody from this committee needs to be sitting on that. It's just Sarah Forsyth will be able to bring that together if needs be. Yes, Sarah.
Sorry, Convener, can I just go back into the school attendance? I noted that you said it would be yourself and Councillor Melville, but I didn't pick up the opposition member for the school attendance.
I didn't think there was one.
It's 3 members, Convener.
It says 2.
I thought it just said the third
Oh, sorry,
one.
sorry, that's the parent council one. Apologies. And the special appeals, is it to be yourself as convener? I missed that one.
Well,
the third member.
It could be me or Councillor Shepherd, depending on who's around. It says convener or vice
Or
convener.
vice convener, but you're not appointing either yourself or Councillor
Well,
at this time.
well, I could do. I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So we move on to item number 7, which is the education recovery update by Kelly McIntosh. There is a huge amount of information in here, and I find some of the initiatives, especially those dealing with language acquisition and development, particularly heartwarming. Gather from me as we go on that I'm a bit passionate about language acquisition in young people. For new councillors, I know there's a lot to take in, but you will get used to it in time. I would like, and I'm sure you agree with me, I would like to record our gratitude to all school staff for keeping open our schools when, you know, they've been up against so much staff absence through COVID, and that's right up till the present time, but they have managed to keep the schools open. So thank you to them and to the secondary staff who've they got to be congratulated too for supporting our young people through the latest SQA exams. And after 2 years of not sitting any exams, I can imagine that would have been a real challenge. So please pass on our warmest thanks to all of the staff. Kelly McIntosh would like to introduce this to you, and then it'll be questions.
Thank you, Councillor Devine, and welcome everybody to our first new Children and Learning Committee. I'm joined by my team today, so we will of course be ready to answer any questions. But for item agenda number 7, I'm pleased to present the latest in a series of reports outlining how COVID recovery and permanent funding has been used to date. This report also outlines the latest operational requirements for our settings. Those of you that were on Children and Learning Committee previously will recognise that we have brought a series of educational updates regarding the recovery, the operational requirements of recovery, and either sought permission for how we use funding or just updated you on how the funding being made available by the government was used, and this is the latest in that series of reports. Thank you also, Councillor Devine, for your kind words about the staff in our schools and our social work colleagues. I'll make sure that's passed on. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions? Councillor Bell, you're muted.
No, not now, I don't think. Thank you, convener, and thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate that report, and I'm sure it really only scratches the surface of the amount of work that's done. I really just wondered if you could give us a little bit more on I guess the kind of metrics that you use to determine that the investment has made a difference. I think it's fair to say we all anticipated the kinds of issues that we were going to need to mitigate as much as we could as the pandemic started. But what does success look like? And I know from years of working in health improvement that it's really difficult to quantify that things aren't as bad as they might have been had those efforts not been made. And I guess I'm looking for that feedback again across our young people and also our staff, because I know how much they've all put into supporting children, and I just want to, I guess, some reassurance that they're doing well through this and that things have indeed been mitigated as much as possible. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks for everything.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor Bell. And I think what's really important for us all to remember is that it's 2.5 years down the line since we first closed our schools almost from COVID, certainly more than 2 years. And the journey throughout that has been difficult for our families in Angus and, as you've pointed out, Councillor Bell, for our staff. Very difficult for everybody involved in schools. When some of the world was back to normal, our schools were working under very different regimes, and that continues to be the case, although to a much lesser extent. But as Councillor Devine alluded to earlier, our schools are still hit and our school staff are still hit largely with COVID absence, and I'm sure that all of you here on the call today will know people in your own lives who are now succumbing to COVID who never had before, and that is amplified in some of our schools. And as early as recently as during May, we had to send our central team into one of our larger primary schools to help keep the school open. And you are aware, if you've been around for the last 2 years, that we've been doing that on an ongoing basis. The COVID recovery funding has been used in a variety of ways, and we've outlined some of the latest funding and how it was spent in this paper, but you'll remember that previous papers outlined how we took on additional temporary staff to make sure our schools could stay open. And I'll be really honest with you, it's interesting to speak about metrics and measurements, because you'll know that that's our daily business. You know, we are very, very aware of how we spend our money. We want to spend it for best value, and we want to be sure that everything we do results in improvements and outcomes for our children and young people. I've said in this forum before, and I'll say it again, if it's not improving outcomes for our children and young people, then we shouldn't really be doing it. You know, so, and to be honest with this, the funding that's mentioned in this paper only came into being in the last year. So it's not even a full school year that we're speaking about. And Councillor Bell, you said you worked in the health service, so you'll know as well as me that real improvement takes place over a series of probably 7 to 8 years to make sure that it's embedded and sustained. And we're talking about measurements over a year. But we are looking obviously at really hard quantitative data in terms of attendance. And I've got the attendance figures for the last year. And you'll be glad to know that the attendance is improving and the COVID-related absence for our children and young people is diminishing. So you'll be glad, because when previous reports, when I've been and spoken about that, the attendance, the absence levels have been quite high. So we're looking at hard measures. We're looking obviously at the Curriculum for Excellence data. Although the government hasn't asked us to submit what we would call the ACIL data throughout COVID, they are asking for some of it now, not all of it, but we continue to collect it locally and our schools are looking at that data. I think the really important thing is all of the measurements that have been put in place, the soft measurements, the mental health measurements, the measurements that we use to decide how to use some of the previous COVID funding for mental health services for our children and young people. That is helping us not only look at how we use the COVID funding, but it's helping us now plan what our priorities are for the next 4 years. We are moving to a 4-year education plan. You know that I have only ever presented 2 one-year plans because we've been in the middle of COVID. I met with my team. We spent a whole day on Monday. It was actually an absolute luxury and an honour to sit down with them in the same space and work with them as we began all of our data and what our priorities should be for the children, young people and families in Angus moving forward. And I'm very happy to say that we are doing that, working in partnership with our colleagues in social work and justice and health and the third sector. So when we speak about metrics, please get used to the fact that I'm not going to just speak about hard attainment data or hard attendance data. It is absolutely holistically, and a lot of the information that we bring to you might be stories, for want of a better way of putting it, real life experiences of the children and families that speak to you every day, the ones that speak to you every day. And that is some of the measurement that we will use, passing on those good stories, using the good and the bad stories to change what we do in our practice. I hope that answers your questions, Councillor Bell. Sort of went on for a bit there.
Thank you. I think that was another paper there, which is brilliant. So thanks very much for that, because those are the kinds of stories that I'm really keen to hear in terms of how young people are coping and recovering through all of this, because it is horribly difficult. So thank you, and I look forward to more detail coming out.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener, and hello, Kelly. It's nice to see you again. I've only met you once, a fellow Dundonian, I believe. I'll be slightly partisan. I have read all about the schools here, but I'll pick on Forfar for an obvious reason. But it is a generic couple of things really that I wanted to kind of highlight. And you've led me nicely, having spoken to my colleague there about stories, because stories right for Enid Blyton for me as a bairn were just wonderful, and I still love stories. But I think I'm just going to pick out a wee bit here. A continuing focus on developing reading for pleasure is planned and supported by the Forfar Academy. Now, that is a generic thing. That'll be right across every school. I've just picked it out there. And I think for me, just to be a voluntary sector background and realising a lot of dyslexic bairns are missed at schools in the past, but they're nae past now. They're nae getting missed now. And I think that kind of thing, for them in particular, with their particular difficulties, really, not only are you exciting young people per se, you're going to help these bairns with their learning disabilities. And before I ask you kind of to comment on that, another thing that is really interesting for me, because I did a lot of it, is outdoor playing with bairns and the learning that they do. And you just have to pass any wee nursery, any place, to hear in any kind of weather, they're all dressed up for the weather and they're having a ball. So if you want to comment, Kelly, that's fine.
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor Clark. Did you want to say anything, Kelly?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment about, so I think that Councillor Clark is referring to the appendix to agenda item 7 that mentions how the Forfar cluster spent their COVID recovery money. And it mentions a continued focus on developing reading for pleasure. And I would draw your attention back to a previous report, and it was mentioned in our annual education plan for this year that Forfar Academy were commended in the First Minister's Reading Challenge. They didn't win a category from my recollection, but they were commended, and it was about their whole community work on reading for pleasure. So it was just to make Councillor Clark aware that that's why it's a continuation, because they've done a lot of work, and having been commended on it, they've not just let it go. They're continuing with that hard work to ensure that it keeps happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Devine. I just wanted to pick up on 4.2 of the report in terms of Muirfield Primary working towards becoming Scotland's first Elkland community-friendly setting. And one of their lead communication practitioners is training to become a Let's Talk tutor. I just wondered if we could have a little bit more information on this. I would imagine this wouldn't be something just of value for Muirfield Primary School, but indeed the whole of Angus. And I guess my kind of query or question on this would be, or my hope would be that this would kind of take into consideration children and young people who may have delayed communication and language, and also where English isn't the first language, and how that kind of all fits into this programme of works. And just kind of on that, just with regards to mask wearing in school, just a little bit of feedback as to where things are at with that, you know, whether this is something that children are still kind of heavily doing, whether mask wearing is kind of still the norm, and what supports are in place for those that perhaps don't want to. And I guess that ties into just that kind of effective communication and language that this 4.3 is talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. And Councillor Speed, with regards to the Elkland programme, which is part of the SOLAR programme mentioned at paragraph 4.1, I'm going to ask Audrey Osborne to come in and give you an update on that. She is much more knowledgeable than I am. With regards to the mask wearing in schools, we still encourage young people to wear masks if they want to. I am in schools a lot more now than I have been for the last 2 years, and I would have to say that I don't see many children and young people choosing to wear masks. Of course, if they wish to, they can. For some time now, they haven't been required to wear them in classrooms, even in our secondary settings, but they are encouraged to wear them in communal areas if they wish to wear them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you, Councillor Speed, for your question. Elkland is being part of the project, the Science of Learning and Reading project that we've been funding using the funds that we've just mentioned. And that's some of our staff working with a speech and language therapist. So Elkland in particular is a range of speech, language and communication training for schools and other settings. And we've had a range of staff who've taken part in training for 3 to 5 year olds and 5 to 11-year-olds. So what that can do is it's looking at becoming a communication friendly setting. It's where Muirfield would be accredited for the training of staff, and that's all their staff, including teachers and support staff, in communication and language development and how they go about promoting good communication. So it's a classroom where you might have children who are communicating in different ways, and they acknowledge that. So that is often visual and not always verbal. So the children that you're discussing and I would be particularly interested in would be part of that. So it's hoped that Muirfield might be the first school in Scotland who will attain that accreditation, because they've done a power of work, not over the last session just, but in a previous to that also. And one of the staff there is training to become a Let's Talk tutor. And that's about the Elkland training, but it's specifically courses for parents and carers. So again, extending that work that's been done in the school so that parents and carers can support the work and the language promotion that's been done in the school. But it's part of the wider SOLAR project, and we have evaluation data on that and more information that I can send to you if that's helpful.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and that is, you know, a kind of really good news story, and it will be interesting to see, hopefully, the positive difference that's made. And I would imagine, like you maybe said earlier, Kelly, it might not be seen kind of straight away. It might take a little wee while for that to start to show through in terms of school performance.
Thank you, Councillor Speed, and thank you, Audrey. And Councillor Shepherd and I are actually going to Muirfield next week because I just thought I need to know about this. I know that's very operational, but it is one of my passions, so I'm looking forward to that very much indeed. Councillor Proctor.
Thanks very much, convener. Kelly and your team, I'm sure you realise that yourself and some others have been on the Education for Children and Lifelong Learning Committee for over 10 years, and you know, we've had many challenges over that time, but nothing like what we had over the COVID period. And I've spoken to numerous parents and indeed grandparents of the main secondary school in Kirriemuir and also the two days, plus parents and grandparents of those who attend the 8 rural primary schools throughout the period, and they've had nothing but admiration for how we've tackled the problems. And I think it's all credit to yourself and also the Children and Learning committees who were in place at that time to ensure that the success that we've achieved has been done so. And I really think, and I'm speaking on behalf of parents now and grandparents from my ward, you know, they're really appreciative of what's going on, what's been done, and what you plan to do in the future. So to you and your team, I'd just like to give you a big vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Nice. Councillor Wan.
Thank you, convener. And just to really reiterate what Councillor Ronnie Proctor said, that I think it's been exceptional over the last 3 years with this COVID issues that we've had. I've got a question, Kelly, if you don't mind. There was a lot of talk about ventilation in the schools last year. Can you update us and let us know if all that's now in place, or are we getting there?
Yeah, Councillor Wan, I don't have the absolute detail with me at this meeting, but I can assure you that we were ahead of the game with the ventilation. I think Angus was held up as an area of good practice many months ago, and that's thanks to our colleagues in the property and assets team who did most of the work from us. So we worked in collaboration with them on the latest guidance and the funding that came in to allow us to have the CO2 monitors in the classrooms to measure the amount of CO2. In fact, there's no CO2 because that's not right, is it? Maybe it is. Yeah, CO2 monitor.
It is. Yeah, it is. We've got them in the office. Yeah, just the main one I remember was mentioned several times, if you don't mind, convener, it was Moray Feith. I believe some of the rooms in there were quite small and there was going to maybe be some issues there. Was that all kind of resolved as well? I'm sure the property team had that in their mind.
Yeah, so we got to a position where we had monitors for every classroom as required. And some of the rooms in the current Moray Feith building are quite small and some of them don't have many windows, and that was perhaps the issue. So we just adapted how many young people we allowed into those rooms as appropriate, as well as making sure the ventilation was correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that an old hand, Councillor Speed?
It is, apologies.
Right, so that was a bit of a mixture of questions and comments, but has anybody else got any comments to make? Right, well, thank you for that, Kelly. We'll move on to, recommendations are just noting each of these, notes the update to temporary education, notes the first allocation of permanent funding, notes the updated operational requirements for schools. Do we note these?
Noted.
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 Oh, the mouse is not working. Right, so agenda item 8. This highlights to me actually the impressive and extensive partnership working that has gone on across Angus for quite a long time, really, between the council and non-council early years settings. And it is vital that we continue to be fair and supportive of these organisations, because they do provide the essential learning experiences for our youngest children at such an important stage of their lives. So I'll hand over to Kelly now for this.
Thanks again, Councillor Devine. And as you've just alluded to, a really important report. So just to give you some information, the Council's open framework for the provision of funded early learning and childcare in non-local authority settings in Angus was implemented as planned in August 2020. So you will remember that we had the opportunity to delay that, but we went ahead as planned. And that currently gives our parents and carers access to 55 voluntary, private and childminder settings locally. Our data shows for April of this year that 34% of our funded early learning and childcare is being delivered by these external providers. This external provision enhances our own local authority provision and plays a vital role in helping us deliver what is referred to as the funding follows the child model. It gives parents and carers access to quality, flexible, accessible and affordable childcare across Angus, so childcare that suits their needs. And the really important element of that is that our external providers offer longer opening hours, year-round provision and more flexible start and finish times to suit what our parents and carers actually need. In order to ensure that our families continue to enjoy this level of choice and control, this report details the rationale for an increase in the hourly rate that is currently paid and seeks approval for how we review rates in the future to be more responsive to changes in the economic position. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions on this one? Any comments? Well, so is that it? The recommendations are 1 to 6, noting 1, noting 3. It's number 2 is approve the proposal by officers to bring forward and carry out an in-depth review of sustainable hourly rates. Do you agree to all these recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your attendance and thanks for the ease of this meeting. Bye-bye just now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Lynn. Bye.
Thanks, Convener.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
To stop the live stream, please.